At an upscale restaurant in Charlotte City, a young black waitress quietly clears tables, her dreams of becoming a pianist hidden behind the clatter of dishes and polite smiles. But when a wealthy and arrogant businessman arrives, his sharp tongue and cruel games turn the spotlight on her, daring her to prove her worth. What he doesn't know is that beneath her uniform and quiet demeanor lies a talent powerful enough to silence a room. As she takes her place at the grand piano, the night takes a turn no one saw coming. It was a bustling Saturday night at the Meridian, an upscale restaurant nestled in the heart of Charlotte, North Carolina. The room buzzed with energy, a symphony of clinking glasses, soft murmurs of conversation, and the faint strains of jazz floating from the grand piano in the corner. The chandeliers above cast a golden glow, reflecting off polished silverware and crystal goblets. It was a place where wealth and elegance intertwined, and the air practically hummed with privilege. Among the waitstaff weaving through the maze of tables was Jana Lewis, a 24-year-old waitress with smooth brown skin and deep, soulful eyes that hinted at stories untold. She moved with practiced grace, balancing trays and smiles as though she had been born to navigate the chaos. Yet, despite her calm demeanor, Jana's heart pulsed to a different rhythm, a rhythm far removed from the clatter of dishes and the hum of idle chatter. Music. It had always been music for her. Ever since she was a little girl growing up in a modest neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia, Jana had found refuge in the keys of a battered old upright piano gifted by a neighbor. While other children played tag in the streets, she sat on the creaky wooden bench, fingers dancing over the keys, mimicking melodies she heard on the radio. It didn't take long for her to progress from simple tunes to classical pieces she discovered in second-hand music books. Her mother, Lisa Lewis, a tireless nurse who often worked double shifts, had been her biggest supporter. Lisa didn't have much to give, certainly not piano lessons or fancy instruments, but she gave Jana her unwavering belief. "Music is your gift, baby," her mother often said. "Don't let anyone take that away from you." But dreams didn't pay the bills. By the time Jana turned 18, the realities of life had begun to close in. College scholarships hadn't come through, and with rent to pay and her younger siblings to care for, her aspirations of becoming a professional pianist faded into the background. She packed away her sheet music and stepped into the working world, trading recitals and performances for aprons and serving trays. And yet, the dream never fully died. When Jana moved to Charlotte 2 years ago, the Meridian wasn't just a job, it was an opportunity. She'd been drawn to the gleaming grand piano in the corner of the dining room, a symbol of something she couldn't quite let go. Though her shifts left little time for practice, she sometimes stole moments in the empty restaurant after hours, letting her fingers brush the keys just to remind herself that music still lived within her. Tonight, as she maneuvered through the crowd, delivering cocktails and clearing plates, Jana stole a glance at the piano. Its glossy black surface gleamed under the soft lighting, and a pang of longing tightened in her chest. It felt so close yet impossibly far away, like a dream locked behind glass. She shook off the thought. Focus. It was just another Saturday night, and there were tables to serve. But then the door swung open, and Marcus Belmont walked in. Heads turned as Marcus stepped through the threshold, the sharp click of his Italian leather shoes cutting through the din. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that practically screamed success. His salt and pepper hair was swept back in a way that seemed both effortless and intentional. A Rolex glinted on his wrist, catching the light as he raised a hand to wave casually at the maitre d'. Behind him trailed 3 companions, 2 men and 1 woman, all equally polished and exuding an air of wealth and entitlement. The maitre d' greeted them with practiced charm, ushering them to one of the best tables in the house near the piano. Jana didn't need to be told who Marcus was. His name was practically legend among the staff, a wealthy investor with a sharp tongue and a penchant for making servers squirm. Some said he enjoyed pushing people just to see how they'd react, a pastime made all too easy by the buffer of money and influence he carried like armor. She straightened her posture and plastered on her most professional smile as she approached their table. "Good evening," she said smoothly. "Welcome to the Meridian. Can I start you off with some drinks?" Marcus barely looked at her. Instead, he gestured vaguely toward the menu, already engrossed in a conversation with one of his companions about stock portfolios and luxury real estate. Jana noted the way he dominated the space, his voice carrying just a little too loudly, his laughter sharp and practiced. She had dealt with men like him before, men who saw waitstaff not as people but as props in their personal performances. But tonight, she reminded herself, he was just another table. Or so she thought. As Jana turned to leave, Marcus's voice cut through the air, stopping her in her tracks. "Jana, is it?" he asked, glancing at her name tag. She turned back, her smile still firmly in place. "Yes, sir." He leaned back in his chair, eyes studying her in a way that made her skin prickle. "You look like someone with hidden talents," he said, the words dripping with mock intrigue. "What else do you do when you're not carrying trays?" Jana felt her stomach tighten. "I play piano sometimes," she answered cautiously, hoping to deflect his attention. Marcus's lips curled into a smirk, and his companions exchanged amused glances. "A pianist, huh?" Marcus said. "Well, isn't that interesting? Maybe you'll treat us to a little performance later." Jana forced a polite laugh. "I'm just here to work tonight." But Marcus wasn't done. "Oh, come on," he said, his voice louder now, drawing attention from nearby tables. "Surely you wouldn't let an opportunity like this pass you by." Or, he let the sentence hang, his tone turning sharp. "Are you all talk and no talent?" The comment landed like a slap, and Jana felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to walk away, to pretend she hadn't heard him, but the weight of his challenge and the eyes of the room held her in place. Her fingers itched and her heart pounded. She glanced at the piano. It gleamed under the lights, both inviting and terrifying. And suddenly, her mother's words came back to her. "Don't let anyone take that away from you." Jana straightened her shoulders, her voice steady but low. "Fine," she said. "I'll play." The room hushed, anticipation thick in the air, as Jana stepped toward the piano. The room seemed to shrink as Jana walked toward the piano, her footsteps echoing faintly against the polished floors. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes following her, curious, skeptical, expectant. The grand piano, with its sleek black finish and ivory keys, sat like a crown jewel in the corner, illuminated by the warm glow of a nearby chandelier. It was beautiful, yet imposing, and as Jana approached, it felt less like an invitation and more like a test. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a self-satisfied smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. His companions, too, were grinning, clearly enjoying the spectacle that was about to unfold. To them, this wasn't music, it was sport. Jana hesitated for a brief moment before sliding onto the bench. Her palms were damp, and her fingers trembled ever so slightly as they hovered above the keys. Memories came rushing back, the late nights practicing on the battered upright piano in her childhood home, the calluses on her fingertips, the hours spent chasing perfection. But this wasn't her living room. This wasn't a recital or a church gathering filled with familiar, supportive faces. This was something else entirely. She exhaled slowly, her mother's voice whispering in her mind. "Don't let anyone take that away from you." Her fingers pressed down softly, and the first note rang out, a tentative, delicate sound that seemed almost too fragile to fill the space. She let it linger, allowing herself a moment to adjust to the feel of the keys beneath her fingers, to settle into the rhythm of the moment. A few patrons shifted in their seats, exchanging skeptical glances. Marcus raised an eyebrow, his expression hovering somewhere between amusement and impatience. But Jana wasn't watching him. She closed her eyes and let her fingers move. The melody began to take shape, a soulful rendition of Clair de Lune by Debussy. The opening notes were tender and intimate, weaving through the room like a whisper. The hum of conversations began to fade as the melody grew, expanding and unfolding into something richer, something deeper. The tension in Jana's shoulders began to ease. Her hands moved more freely, more confidently, and the music seemed to take on a life of its own. Each note poured out like a confession, a story of longing, of sacrifice, of dreams deferred but never forgotten. The audience felt it. A hush fell over the room, so complete that the sound of the piano seemed to vibrate in the stillness. Even the clink of glasses and silverware had stopped. Waiters paused in their tracks. Diners leaned forward in their seats, their eyes fixed on the woman at the piano. Marcus, too, had gone quiet. His smirk had faded, replaced by something else, something that looked uncomfortably close to doubt. But Jana didn't see it. Her eyes remained closed as her fingers moved fluidly, the music swelling and cascading in waves. She played not just to fill the room, but to fill the space inside herself, the space that had been empty for too long. She thought of her mother. Of the nights spent alone at the piano, chasing the sound of something she couldn't quite name. Of the years spent waiting tables, wondering if her dreams had been too big, too impossible. And she let it all pour out. By the time the final note rang out, the room was utterly still. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but silence. Then applause. A sigh. It started as a murmur, then grew, swelling into something thunderous. People stood, clapping and cheering. Some wiped at their eyes, visibly moved by what they had just witnessed. Jana sat frozen, her hands still resting lightly on the keys, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might drown out the sound of the applause. And then she turned. Marcus sat rigid in his chair. His hands were clasped together, his knuckles white, and his expression was unreadable. His companions no longer looked amused. Instead, they exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unsure of how to react. Finally, Marcus clapped. Slowly. The sound was hollow, almost reluctant, and it rang false against the sincerity of the crowd's cheers. "Well," he said, loud enough to cut through the applause. That was unexpected. The words hung awkwardly in the air, and Jana met his gaze with quiet steadiness. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply stood, smoothing her apron and stepping away from the piano. "Thank you," she said softly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The applause began to fade, replaced by murmurs of admiration as Jana made her way back toward the server's station. She could feel the eyes on her, but this time they didn't feel like judgment. They felt like recognition. Behind her, Marcus shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable under the weight of the moment he had created but could no longer control. And for the first time that night, Jana felt free. The applause finally began to fade, but its echo lingered in the air, wrapping around Jana like a shield. She walked back toward the server's station, her hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline, but her head was held high. The piano's final note still resonated in her ears, a reminder that she had faced the storm and emerged unbroken. She didn't dare look back at Marcus just yet. Not because she feared him, but because she knew without needing to see that the balance of power had shifted. Her co-workers greeted her with wide eyes and quiet nods of approval. Maya, a fellow waitress and one of Jana's closest friends, slipped beside her as she reached the server's station. "Girl," Maya whispered, her voice barely containing her excitement. "I didn't know you could do that." Jana smiled faintly, still trying to catch her breath. Neither did they. Maya glanced toward Marcus's table and smirked. "Especially him." Jana finally allowed herself to look back. Marcus sat rigid in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. His smirk had vanished completely, replaced by something harder to read: discomfort, maybe even regret, though his carefully composed expression tried to hide it. His companions looked equally uneasy, shifting in their seats as if the chairs had suddenly become too small. Marcus's gaze flicked toward Jana, and for a brief moment their eyes met. She held his stare not defiantly, but steadily, as if daring him to say what they both knew he couldn't. He looked away first. But Marcus wasn't one to accept defeat so easily. He leaned back in his chair, gesturing to a waiter for another drink, and forced a chuckle loud enough to be heard. "Well," he said, his voice cutting through the low murmur of resumed conversation, "looks like we've got a hidden gem in the staff. Who knew?" The words were meant to reclaim control, to downplay what had just happened, but they fell flat. No one laughed. Even his companions didn't follow his lead. The woman seated next to him, Samantha, with her perfectly styled hair and diamond earrings, fiddled with her napkin, avoiding eye contact. One of the men cleared his throat and took a sip of wine, clearly wishing to disappear. Marcus's forced bravado had no audience, and Jana knew it. She stepped forward then, approaching their table with the same poise she'd carried moments earlier at the piano. This time, though, she wasn't holding a tray, just her presence, steady and unshaken. "Is there anything else I can get for you?" she asked, her voice calm and professional. Marcus looked up at her, and for the first time he seemed to hesitate. His confidence, so effortless earlier, now felt strained, like a mask beginning to crack. "No," he said finally, his tone clipped. He picked up his glass of whiskey, swirling it absently. "We're fine." "Good," Jana said, offering a polite nod before turning to leave. But then one of Marcus's companions spoke up. "That was incredible," said James, the youngest in the group. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I mean it. I've never heard anything like that." Jana paused, surprised by his sincerity. "Thank you." "No, seriously," he continued, ignoring the sharp look Marcus shot him. "You've got real talent. Are you pursuing music professionally?" Jana hesitated, the question hitting closer than she expected. "Not yet," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "But I hope to." James nodded, clearly impressed. "You should. Don't let this place keep you." Marcus stiffened. "James," he said sharply, but the younger man ignored him. Jana offered a small smile. "Thank you, I appreciate that." And with that she walked away, leaving Marcus to stew in the remains of his shattered ego. The rest of the night passed in a blur, but the energy in the room never quite returned to what it had been before Jana's performance. The tension around Marcus's table lingered, heavy and unspoken, while other patrons stopped Jana as she moved between tables to offer quiet words of admiration. "You're gifted," an older woman whispered as Jana poured her coffee. "Don't waste it." "You should be on a stage," said another man, slipping her a tip that was far more generous than necessary. Each comment added a layer of warmth to the confidence Jana had felt at the piano. But it was the look on Marcus's face, the realization that no amount of money or power could undo what had happened, that stayed with her most. As the night wound down, Marcus and his group left without fanfare. No loud goodbyes, no lingering drinks. Just a quick retreat, as though staying any longer would only prolong their humiliation. But as Marcus passed Jana on his way out, he paused. "You made your point," he said quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Jana met his eyes, her expression steady. "It was never about making a point," she said softly. "I just wanted to play." Marcus said nothing. And then he walked away. Later that night, as Jana helped close down the restaurant, Maya approached her with wide eyes and a grin. "You're not going to believe this," she said, waving her phone. "That guy in the corner booth, the one who clapped the loudest, he's a producer, a real producer, and he wants to talk to you." Jana froze. "What?" Maya nodded, practically bouncing on her toes. "I overheard him asking the manager about you. He wants you to record a demo." For the first time all night, Jana felt her composure crack. She laughed a soft, disbelieving sound and sank onto one of the empty chairs. A demo. A chance. Her fingers twitched, already aching to play again. And as she sat there, surrounded by the fading hum of the night, Jana realized something. This wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. The soft hum of closing time settled over the meridian. Tables were wiped clean, chairs stacked neatly, and the last echoes of conversation faded as the final patrons made their way out the door. Jana stood near the bar, her apron folded in her hands, her mind still reeling from Maya's words. A demo. She had dreamed of this moment for years long, restless nights spent imagining herself in a recording studio, headphones wrapped around her ears, her fingers dancing over the keys. But now that the possibility was here, it felt unreal. Like she might wake up at any second and find herself back in her tiny apartment, her fingers brushing the chipped keys of her second-hand piano. Maya's voice snapped her out of the daze. "You okay?" Jana blinked and looked up. Maya was watching her carefully, her brow furrowed with concern. "Yeah," Jana said quickly, but even she didn't sound convinced. I wasn't expecting this." Maya grinned and nudged her shoulder. "You'd better start expecting it, girl. That performance tonight. You didn't just play the piano, you owned it. And you saw how people reacted. That producer wasn't the only one impressed." Jana's smile faltered, her doubts creeping back in. "But what if it's just talk? What if nothing comes of it?" Maya crossed her arms. "What if it does? What if this is the start of something huge, and you're too scared to grab it?" The words hit Jana hard because she knew Maya was right. Fear had always been her biggest enemy, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear that her dreams were too big for someone like her. But tonight had been different. Tonight, she had faced that fear and won. Before she could respond, the restaurant manager, Mr. Caldwell, approached. He was a no-nonsense man in his early 50s, always impeccably dressed and intimidating in a way that made the staff stand up straighter whenever he walked into a room. But tonight, his usually stern face softened as he stopped in front of Jana. "Miss Lewis," he said, addressing her formally in a way that caught her off guard. "I don't normally make a habit of commenting on performances, but what you did tonight, that was something special." Jana opened her mouth to respond, but he raised a hand. "I've already spoken to the producer who was here," he continued. "He left his card and asked that I pass it along to you." He reached into his pocket and handed her a small, sleek business card with embossed lettering. "Nathan Riley, music producer. Riley Company Productions." Jana's fingers trembled as she took the card, her eyes scanning the name over and over, as though trying to memorize it. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Caldwell nodded, but his expression turned serious. "This could be big for you, Jana, but I need you to think carefully. Opportunities like this don't come around often, and once you take that step, there's no turning back." She met his gaze and, for the first time that night, felt something close to certainty settle in her chest. "I know," she said. "I'm ready." Later that night, Jana sat alone in her small apartment, the producer's card resting on the coffee table in front of her. She stared at it like it might disappear if she looked away for too long. Her old upright piano stood against the wall, its surface worn and its keys slightly yellowed from age. It wasn't much, but it had been there through every high and low, every late-night practice session, every tear-soaked moment of doubt. She ran her fingers gently over the keys, pressing down softly to play a single note. The sound filled the room, soft and imperfect, but it was hers. The weight of the night pressed down on her. What if she wasn't good enough? What if the producer changed his mind? And then she thought about Marcus. About the way he had tried to tear her down, how he had underestimated her, dismissed her, and how, with nothing but her talent and her courage, she had turned the tables. She couldn't let doubt win. Not again. Taking a deep breath, she picked up her phone and dialed the number on the card. It rang twice before a smooth, professional voice answered. "This is Nathan Riley." Jana swallowed hard, her voice shaking only slightly. "Hi, Mr. Riley. This is Jana Lewis from the Meridian." There was a brief pause, then a warm, enthusiastic response. "Jana, I was hoping you'd call. I haven't stopped thinking about your performance tonight. Are you free to meet next week? I'd love to talk about what we can do together." Her heart skipped. "Yes, I'd love that." They set a time and place, and as Jana hung up the phone, she couldn't stop the smile that spread across her face. The next week at the Meridian felt different. Patrons greeted Jana with smiles and compliments, and even her co-workers treated her with a newfound respect. But Marcus Belmont's absence was the most noticeable change. Word had spread about what had happened, and though Marcus was known for his pride, it seemed he had chosen to avoid returning to the scene of his humiliation. His absence was as loud as his presence had been, and Jana couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction in knowing she had left an impression he couldn't erase. James, Marcus's younger companion, did return. He stopped by one evening, asking for Jana specifically. "I just wanted to say thank you," he told her, "for reminding me that people like him don't always get the last word." Jana smiled. "Sometimes it's not about words," she said. "Sometimes it's about what you do." On her last night at the Meridian, Jana played one final song on the grand piano after closing time. This time it wasn't out of fear or defiance, but out of gratitude for the lessons, the struggles, and the courage she had found in herself. As the last note lingered in the empty room, she closed the piano lid and stood, ready to step into whatever came next. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She wasn't just a dreamer. She was an artist. And the world was finally ready to listen. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.